when I have some money, I come back, you can give me massage.
And she said, okay. And I walked away, and she was very happy.
Andy Kaufman was a master of the long con, a performer who became famous by blurring the lines between comedy and reality. From his beloved role on Taxi to his wild wrestling stunts, he kept the world guessing. However, his boundary-pushing style eventually led to a controversial Saturday Night Live appearance where the audience actually voted to have him fired. Tragically, only a year after this public exit, Kaufman passed away, leaving behind a surreal legacy. So, why was he really fired from SNL? And did that professional rejection have anything to do with his untimely death? Join us as we look into the heartbreaking final act of Andy Kaufman, living in the Wall, the Long Island suburb that created an anti-comedy legend. Before Andy Kaufman was baffling live television audiences, he was just a quirky kid growing up in a middle-class Jewish family in Great Neck, Long Island. Born on January 17, 1949, Andy was the oldest of 3 children born to Janice, a former fashion model, and Stanley, a jewelry salesman. From the very beginning, Andy had a unique spark. By age 9, he was already putting on shows at children's birthday parties, playing records and screening cartoons. When he wasn't performing, he poured his imagination into writing poetry and stories, even finishing an unpublished novel called The Hollering Mango by age 16. Around this same time, a school visit from legendary Nigerian musician Babatunde Olatunji inspired him to pick up the conga drums, an instrument that would later become a signature part of his stage presence. Despite his creative drive, standard school life was a major struggle. Andy mostly dragged himself through high school to please his father, finally graduating in 1967. This milestone, however, brought him face to face with the Vietnam War draft. But Andy found a way out through a psychological evaluation, earning a permanent 4F medical deferment. The evaluating doctor wrote that Andy had lived in a fantasy world since preschool and would completely lose his mind if put in the military. Instead of being insulted, Andy absolutely loved this letter. He proudly showed it to his friends, who knew the hilarious truth. Andy had intentionally treated the psych evaluation like a high-stakes joke. As his friend Gil Gevins later noted, Andy knew exactly what he was doing and simply liked letting people believe whatever they wanted. With the draft behind him, Andy took a year off before heading to Boston to study television production at Graham Junior College. This is where his vision really started taking shape as he created and starred in his own campus television show, Uncle Andy's Funhouse. His dedication to his creative idols was just as intense. In August 1969, he hitchhiked all the way to Las Vegas, showing up completely unannounced at the International Hotel just to meet Elvis Presley. By the time he graduated in 1971, Andy was ready for the real world, bringing his strange new routines to small coffee houses and comedy clubs along the East Coast. But right from the jump, the precise nature of what he did was a total mystery. He fiercely rejected the title of comedian, instead insisting on calling himself an entertainer. In fact, he famously claimed that he had never told a single joke on stage. While any other performer making that claim would sound crazy, Andy knew exactly what he was doing, setting the stage for a career that would keep the world guessing until the very end. The Roommate from Caspiar, how an Iranian immigrant inspired Andy's greatest illusion. While studying television performance at Graham Junior College in Boston, Andy Kaufman shared a room with an Iranian immigrant named Bijan Kimiachi. Like Andy, Kimiachi was navigating a whole new world, but he did so with a heavy, distinct accent and a lot of trouble speaking to people. Kimiachi later recalled that he was probably Andy's only true friend at the time. By all accounts, this quiet friendship sparked something brilliant in Andy. He began adopting his roommate's unique accent and speech patterns, quietly weaving them into the foundation of a persona that would soon take the entertainment industry by storm. That persona became known as Foreign Man, a meek, high-pitched character who claimed to be from a fictional island in the Caspian Sea called Caspiar. Armed with this bizarre alter ego, Andy managed to convince Bud Friedman, the owner of the famous New York City comedy club, the Improv, to let him take the stage. Audiences had absolutely no idea how to react to what happened next. Instead of telling traditional jokes, Foreign Man would stand perfectly still on stage, turn on a portable record player, and play the theme song to the Mighty Mouse cartoon. He wouldn't move an inch until the lyrics hit, "Here I come to save the day," at which point he would enthusiastically lip-sync the line with wide eyes before freezing back into silence. From there, the act only grew stranger. He would proceed to tell purposefully terrible jokes, followed by celebrity impressions that were intentionally awful. In his thick, fake accent, he would announce to the crowd that he was going to imitate the President of the United States, only to say, "Hello, I am Mr. Carter, the President of the United States. Thank you very much," in the exact same voice. Just when the audience was completely conditioned to think this guy had absolutely no talent, Andy would pull off his ultimate trap. He would announce an impression of Elvis Presley, turn his back to the crowd, rip off his jacket, slick back his hair, and launch into a jaw-dropping, hip-shaking performance that rivaled the king of rock and roll himself. He would even mimic Elvis by tossing his leather jacket into the crowd, only to immediately and politely ask for it back. Once the song ended, he would step right back into character, take a simple bow, and meekly say, "Thank you very much." This brilliant bit of performance art quickly caught the attention of television executives. Parts of the Foreign Man Act were broadcast during the very first season of Saturday Night Live in 1975, with the Mighty Mouse sketch airing on the historic premiere episode. By 1976, Andy brought a variation of the character to the short-lived show Van Dyke and Company, where he played a disruptive performer who kept interrupting Dick Van Dyke's sketches. But the biggest breakthrough came when Hollywood decided to buy the character outright. Television producers adapted Foreign Man into Latka Gravis, a lovable mechanic for the ABC sitcom Taxi. Andy's longtime manager, George Shapiro, pushed him hard to take the gig. Andy actually hated traditional sitcoms and wanted nothing to do with the show, but Shapiro convinced him that the steady television exposure would give him the fame and financial freedom to fund his own bizarre live gigs. Andy agreed to the job, but under strict conditions. He demanded to only appear in 14 episodes per season, and he initially tried to force the producers to hire his obnoxious lounge singer alter ego, Tony Clifton, for 4 episodes. That specific arrangement fell through after Andy deliberately sabotaged Clifton's behavior on set, leading to the character being fired. Back on the show, the writers eventually gave Latka multiple personality disorder. This was a stroke of genius that allowed Andy to break out of the Foreign Man mold and showcase his incredible range. Suddenly, Latka would transform into Vic Ferrari, a smooth, womanizing egomaniac, or even mimic Alex Rieger, the show's level-headed main character, played by Judd Hirsch. The performance was so captivating that it earned Andy 2 Golden Globe nominations for Best Supporting Actor. Over the years, a lot of myths grew around Andy's behavior on the Taxi set, with rumors painting him as a completely unmanageable, disruptive nightmare. However, Sam Simon, who served as a writer and showrunner for the series, later set the record straight. Simon revealed that the stories of Andy being a chaotic terror were largely a fiction invented by Andy's creative partner, Bob Zmuda, to protect the mythos of an out-of-control genius. In reality, Simon stated that Andy was a complete professional who was always transparent about his stunts. Still, Simon admitted that Andy would have absolutely loved the wild, exaggerated rumors. For Andy, the line between reality and the act was always meant to be blurred, and he was more than happy to let the world believe whatever story kept them watching. But his sitcom work was only a warm-up for his ultimate stunt. Driven by a deep obsession with the world of staged fights, Andy decided to take his love for tricking the public out of the television studio and straight into a real wrestling ring. How Andy Kaufman used professional wrestling to con a nation. As Andy Kaufman's fame grew, so did his obsession with pushing boundaries. He became fascinated by professional wrestling, specifically the concept of kayfabe, the industry term for keeping up the illusion that staged matches are completely real. Combining this with his love for elaborate hoaxes, Andy decided to step into the ring himself. He began wrestling women during his live acts, loudly proclaiming himself the intergender wrestling champion of the world. Adopting an arrogant, villainous wrestling persona, he even offered a $1,000 prize to any woman who could pin him, even bringing his friend, performance artist Laurie Anderson, into the act for a time. Ambitious to take his new routine to a bigger stage, Andy initially approached Vince McMahon Sr., the head of the World Wrestling Federation. However, the elder McMahon completely shot him down, refusing to mix Hollywood show business with his serious wrestling promotion. Undeterred, Andy talked things over with his friend, wrestling photographer Bill Apter. Seeing the potential, Apter called Memphis wrestling icon Jerry the King Lawler and introduced the two men over the phone. This introduction set off one of the most infamous feuds in pop culture history. Andy finally agreed to step into the ring with a man, Lawler himself, in the Memphis wrestling circuit. To rile up the local crowds, Andy filmed satirical videos teaching Memphis residents how to use soap and openly mocked the city as the redneck capital of America. The rivalry quickly escalated into a series of highly coordinated, staged events. During one intense match, Lawler hit Andy with his signature piledriver move, supposedly breaking Andy's neck. The drama reached a boiling point in 1982 when both men appeared on Late Night with David Letterman. For months, Andy had been wearing a medical neck brace in public, insisting his injuries were severe. On live television, the tension exploded, and it ended with Lawler slapping Andy right out of his chair. It was a massive television moment that left the entire country wondering if they had just witnessed a genuine assault. Back in Memphis, Andy continued to defend his intergender championship at the Mid-South Coliseum. To raise the stakes, he added a new stipulation to his $1,000 challenge. If any woman managed to pin him, he would marry her and completely shave his head. The commitment to the bit worked perfectly. For years, the public believed Andy and Lawler genuinely hated each other. It wasn't until 1995, more than a decade after Andy's death, that the truth was officially revealed to the mainstream public during an NBC documentary, where actor Jim Carrey exposed the secret. In reality, Andy and Lawler were incredibly close friends, and the entire feud was a beautifully executed work. While officials at St. Francis Hospital had claimed at the time that Andy's neck injuries were real, Lawler's 2002 biography pulled back the curtain on how they pulled it off. Lawler admitted that while Andy did experience some legitimate minor neck strain, the two exaggerated the medical severity to sell the story. Lawler also revealed that the legendary Letterman meltdown was entirely Andy's brainchild, including the infamous slap. Perhaps the most telling detail of Andy's pure love for the art form came from wrestling promoter Jerry Jarrett. For 2 years, Jarrett faithfully mailed Andy weekly paychecks equivalent to what the biggest main event wrestlers in the business were making. Andy, however, never cashed or deposited a single one. For him, the paycheck wasn't the reward. The ultimate prize was successfully blurring the lines of reality for an entire nation. Andy's wrestling journey even crossed over into cinema with the 1983 film My Breakfast with Blassie, a parody of the art house film My Dinner with Andre, featuring professional wrestling personality Classy Freddie Blassie. The project proved to be a milestone for Andy in more ways than one. It was directed by Johnny Legend, whose sister, Lynn Margulies, appeared in the film and ultimately became the great love of Andy's final years. But to truly understand why Andy spent his entire life manipulating reality, you have to look past the wrestling rings and Hollywood sets. His obsession with pulling the wool over the world's eyes started with a heartbreaking lie he was told when he was just a little boy. Waiting at the window inside the 5-year-old heartbreak that shaped an anti-comedy legend. Behind all of Andy Kaufman's chaotic performances and elaborate hoaxes lay a single, defining childhood moment that changed everything. Up until he was nearly 5 years old, Andy shared an incredibly close bond with his grandfather, whom he affectionately called Papu. But one day, the little boy's parents sat him down and told him that Papu had simply gone away on a long trip. The news was devastating. Andy couldn't comprehend why the person closest to him would just vanish without saying goodbye. In reality, his grandfather had passed away, but his parents assumed a child his age couldn't wrap his mind around the concept of death. They chose a gentle lie instead, a lie Andy only uncovered as he grew older. In archival footage, his father, Stanley Kaufman, later admitted that hiding the truth might have been the wrong move for a sensitive child like Andy. Stanley recalled how the little boy spent long, silent stretches staring out the window, quietly waiting for Papu to come home. According to his best friend and creative partner, Bob Zmuda, this childhood disappointment became the magic ingredient that shaped the entertainer's entire life. The deep pain of rejection and embarrassment drove the young boy to retreat into his bedroom, creating an isolated world where he could control his own reality. Zmuda firmly believes that without this trauma, the Andy Kaufman we know today would never have existed. It was the spark that drove him to spend his career manipulating the truth, from his run on Taxi to his final days battling cancer in 1984. But the blurring of reality didn't stop with his death. It extended into his private life and his complicated legacy. Although Andy never married, he did have a daughter named Maria, conceived with his high school girlfriend. The young couple gave her up for adoption, and Maria grew up to be a radiation therapist, completely unaware of her famous roots. It wasn't until her 20s that she investigated her birth parents and discovered that her father was the man the world knew as Latka Gravas. While she never got the chance to meet Andy before he passed, she was able to form a warm, meaningful relationship with his father, Stanley. In a twist that felt like something straight out of Andy's own playbook, a fake daughter eventually emerged years later to stir the pot. In 2013, a woman took the stage at a comedy club in Manhattan, claiming to be Andy's daughter. She dropped a bombshell, telling the audience that Kaufman was actually alive and had faked his own death just to be a stay-at-home dad. As much as fans wanted to believe the ultimate long con was true, this was just another hoax. The woman was actually a New York actress, proving that even decades after his death, the world is still caught in the surreal, confusing, and fascinating web. Andy Kaufman first started spinning as a heartbroken little boy looking out a window. But the tricks didn't stop with his family life. They extended right back onto the television screen. When a new late-night comedy program was desperate for ratings, Andy delivered a staged meltdown so realistic that it almost tore the entire studio apart. Saving a struggling show, why ABC executives let Andy stage a live television riot. In the early 1980s, Andy Kaufman found a new target for his tricks, a struggling comedy show called Fridays. During a live broadcast in 1981, Andy was in a sketch about two couples on a double date. Right in the middle of his lines, he suddenly stopped, broke character, and said, "I feel really stupid." The other actors tried to keep the scene going, but Andy kept complaining about how dumb and unfunny the script was. Finally, cast member Michael Richards, who later played Kramer on Seinfeld, got mad, walked off camera, grabbed the cue cards, and slammed them down on the table in front of Andy. The sketch was totally ruined, and the show quickly cut to a commercial. The next day, the newspapers screamed that Andy had finally gone crazy. In reality, Andy was super happy. The whole fight was just a setup to get people talking about the struggling show. When the TV network finally admitted the fight was planned, Andy kept the act going. He made a tearful apology on TV, crying that the outburst ruined his career and made his wife leave him. He didn't even have a wife, but the audience believed the drama anyway. While people liked Andy, they hated his other character, Tony Clifton. Wearing a thick wig, sunglasses, and a fake mustache, Clifton was a rude, mean, and annoying lounge singer. Andy told everyone that Clifton was a totally real, separate person. To keep people fooled, Andy often had his friend, Bob Zmuda, dress up as Clifton for interviews. Zmuda would go on TV as Clifton and complain that Andy Kaufman was ruining his reputation. Andy used this mean character to mess with his regular TV show, Taxi. When he signed up for Taxi, he forced the bosses to give Clifton a separate contract. Once the deal was made, Andy showed up to the set dressed as Clifton. He acted drunk, arrived super late, and brought two rowdy women with him. He insulted the cast and caused so much trouble that security guards had to physically drag him off the lot. For Andy, ruining a good job wasn't a mistake. It was all part of the show to keep the world guessing, but pushing the audience's buttons eventually carried a heavy price. While his tricks on the sitcom set were kept behind closed doors, taking his stunts onto live television pushed the public too far, leading to an unprecedented TV eviction that changed his career forever. The Ring That Broke the Studio, How the Intergender Wrestling Skits Ruined Andy's SNL Run. Andy Kaufman's strange style of humor is what made him famous, but it is also what got him kicked off Saturday Night Live in the early 1980s. Andy started appearing on SNL during its very first season in 1975. The show's boss, Dick Ebersol, invited him to join after seeing him on another comedy show. This television fame helped Andy land movie roles and his famous part as Latka Gravas on the hit show Taxi. Over 7 years, Andy created some of SNL's most famous moments, like his Mighty Mouse lip sync. He appeared on the show 16 times in total, but on November 20th, 1982, his luck ran out. The show started getting flooded with complaints about Andy's wrestling skits. In these routines, he would invite women from the audience to wrestle him. The matches were completely planned out, and Andy always won, proudly calling himself the intergender wrestling champion of the world. Audiences grew tired of the bit, and it led to his ultimate downfall. During a live broadcast, producer Dick Ebersol came on screen to trash Andy's style of humor. The next week, a cast member announced that the viewers at home would decide Andy's fate. The network set up 2 phone numbers, one to keep Andy and one to dump Andy. Viewers had just 1 hour to call in and vote. At the end of the night, the results were announced. Over 195,000 people voted to dump Andy, while only about 169,000 voted to keep him. The studio audience cheered, and the show announced that Andy Kaufman was banned for life. Behind the scenes, the cast was upset to lose such a creative friend. Andy himself was heartbroken. He even paid for his own airtime on local TV stations to beg fans to let him come back, but it did not work. Following this disastrous SNL exit, Andy's life took a tragic turn. In 1984, just over a year after being publicly rejected by his favorite show, Andy passed away from a rare form of lung cancer at the young age of 35. Because he spent his entire career pulling pranks and blurring reality, many fans, friends, and family members believed he had faked his own death as one final joke. But while the rumors of his survival lived on, Andy never returned to the stage, leaving behind a legacy that people still talk about today. But long before his death became the ultimate conspiracy theory, the tragedy was already unfolding in secret. The final act of Andy's life began with a medical crisis that was terrifyingly real, even if the people closest to him refused to believe it. The diagnosis: no one believed. Inside the tragic shock of Andy's final months. Around Thanksgiving in 1983, Andy Kaufman's family noticed he was coughing a lot and getting very sick. After a series of medical tests, Andy received a shocking diagnosis in January 1984. He had a rare and aggressive form of lung cancer. For a lifelong health fanatic who had not smoked since high school, the news was stunning. Doctors suggested he might have contracted it through secondhand smoke, and they gave him only months to live. Because the cancer was incurable, the medical staff primarily recommended treatments aimed at keeping him comfortable. When Andy first shared the news, his friends did not believe him. Because he had spent his entire career pulling pranks, everyone assumed it was just another one of his elaborate tricks. He had even joked openly in the past about faking his own death, but this time it was a harsh reality. He waited until February to tell his distraught parents, and then he began a desperate search for a cure. Andy combined traditional medicine with unusual alternative treatments. He underwent chemotherapy and radiation, which caused his hair to fall out. True to his unique style, he showed up at the movie premiere of My Breakfast with Blassie, sporting a fresh mohawk. He also tried a macrobiotic diet, worked with healing crystals, and even traveled all the way to the Philippines to try psychic surgery. For a brief moment during his travels, his condition seemed to improve, but as soon as he returned to America, his health took a sharp turn for the worse. Eventually, the disease forced Andy into a wheelchair. When people saw him out in public looking frail, they would tell him he had gone too far with his latest stunt, still refusing to believe he was actually sick. On May 16, 1984, Andy Kaufman was pronounced dead at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles at just 35 years old. It is said that he died with one last gasp and with his eyes wide open. When the nurse tried to close his eyes, they opened right back up, as if he were refusing to give up even in his final moments. At his funeral, which was reserved for close friends and relatives, wrestler Fred Blassie sat in the front row per Andy's personal request. The atmosphere was filled with lingering doubt. Some mourners actually poked Andy's body while it lay in the casket, fully expecting him to jump up and yell that he got them. Later, the Comedy Store held a memorial ceremony where they played a recording of Andy singing the song "This Friendly World." In the years following his passing, new theories emerged about his final months. His girlfriend, Lynn Margulies, later suggested that Andy might have actually died from complications related to AIDS, which she claimed was misdiagnosed or covered up due to the intense social prejudice surrounding the disease in the 1980s. She stated that Andy was bisexual, but had asked her to keep it a secret until after his parents passed away. However, Andy's brother, Michael, strongly rejected this idea, defending the original medical diagnosis and pointing out that he personally drove Andy to his regular chemotherapy treatments. Despite official death certificates and the testimonies of the people who stood by his deathbed, including Margulies and his manager, George Shapiro, the rumors of his survival never truly went away. Just like Elvis or Tupac, Andy became the subject of countless survival myths. His creative partner, Bob Zmuda, often fueled these rumors by claiming that Andy had discussed wanting to fake his death for a few decades just to pull off the ultimate lifelong prank. Zmuda even wrote a message directly to Andy in a book, begging him to finally come back. The mystery deepened a year after Andy's death when his obnoxious alter ego, Tony Clifton, suddenly returned to comedy clubs. Many fans expected Andy to walk out from behind the curtain, but instead, they just got Tony. The character continued to tour the club circuit for years, even famously getting into a confrontation with actor Jim Carrey during the making of the 1999 biographical film Man on the Moon, where Carrey delivered an amazing portrayal of Andy's life. Decades later, the questions still linger. In 1995, a comedy salute to Andy Kaufman aired on television and earned an Emmy nomination, proving that the world's fascination with his life had not faded. To this day, a dedicated group of fans believe Andy is still out there, hiding out in total silence, just waiting for the perfect moment to surprise everyone. Whether he is truly gone or simply pulling off the longest performance in history, Andy Kaufman successfully built a legacy where nobody will ever know the absolute truth. Were you a fan of Andy Kaufman? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.